Chapter 181. Melting Steel 2. This battle was an offensive and a siege at that. It wouldn't have been strange if many people had prepared to kill and be killed. However, he deliberately crashed the excavator into the fortress wall where there were few defensive troops. That way, the impact he received was much greater and the chance of success for the operation was lower, but he did it that way, so that the fortress would collapse without casualties. He calculated precisely the timing when things would break and rebound. Thus, the excavator disappeared precisely when he snapped his fingers, as if an angel had removed it with divine power. And he had learned how to identify commanders among soldiers by their attire and atmosphere. That way, he immediately picked out Lucas from the crowd, as if he had read Lucas's mind. Numerous powers were created through countless practice and effort. Vicente quietly looked up at Kin Issei. He hung the towel on his shoulder and changed clothes as if it were nothing. That practice and effort saved hundreds of Spanish soldiers and Virginians. Equals. No, not a single one? Yes, there were no remains left, and not many traces of battle. It seems all were taken prisoner. When core banks fell, ships lost their stopover point for receiving supplies and conducting reconnaissance. It wasn't just captured. The stopover point simply disappeared, without a trace. Although it was a fortress hastily built with timber in a short time due to lack of stone, it was still a place where hundreds were stationed. It certainly wasn't a place that could vanish futilely like smoke. What method did the Virginians use? Were there other survivors hiding nearby?
No.
All 200 or so soldiers disappeared like ghosts, so we have no way of knowing. Not a single person left. Not a single grain left. Even the couple of ships that were docked. They all had gone somewhere. Probably to Virginia. But how? The Viceroy of New Spain, Juan de Mendoza y Luna, turned pale. He had two strategic objectives. To pretend to carry out the absurd order of kidnapping Elizabeth so as not to displease the king. Simultaneously, to achieve moderate success with minimal losses and conclude the situation smoothly. Currently, the warships are returning to the ports of Florida. It seems it became difficult to continue operations there as supplies became challenging. But the king was going mad, questioning why he had provoked France. And with that, he had suffered massive losses, evaporating hundreds of soldiers and several warships. All failures. Already the word downfall was floating in his mind. It was absurd that after all that effort, the tower he had built would collapse. For now, let's set up a new stopover point. The losses aren't as great as we thought, so for now. Your Excellency, there's not enough time to set up a stopover point right away. I'll make time. Haven't we done it once already? It was possible when their vigilance was loose, but after being threatened once, it will be difficult to implement the same method again. Then can't we start from a more distant place? So somehow we could recruit the local natives and... We must. Knock. Knock. Here it comes. Enter. Your Excellency. I heard the news that reconnaissance and blockade toward Virginia failed. Anyway, with this level of failure, the homeland will find it difficult to continue Your Excellency's term. You failed to capture the English Queen, and even caused diplomatic friction, so regrettably. Wait. Juan de Mendoza signals to the admiral with whom he had been conversing until just now. The admiral quietly slips out of the office, closing the door. Thus, only the Viceroy of New Spain and the envoy of the Spanish king remained. The Viceroy carefully asked the envoy, "Who sent you?" "Pardon? What do you mean? Weren't we just talking?" "Of course, His Majesty the King." Thump. The Viceroy strikes the desk, rises to his feet, and looks down at the envoy. "Who sent you?" "His Grace the Duke does ask me this and that." That answer was sufficient. There was only one person in Spain who could be called the Duke without any qualifier. The Duke of Lerma. The Viceroy desperately racked his brains and chose his words. He mentally pieced together the snippets of news from the homeland that he had heard. What does the Duke of Lerma, the de facto highest power in this country, want. Tell His Grace the Duke to give me one more chance. I don't understand what you mean. His Grace the Duke. The Viceroy painfully squeezes out each word and whispers in a low voice, ask him if he's pleased with attention being drawn to the New World. At those words, the envoy's eyes sharpen for a moment. He unnecessarily checks if footsteps can be heard nearby or if someone is watching through that window, then quietly nods. Come to think of it, I don't have the authority to immediately criticize Viceroy's governance. I'll return to the homeland first and inquire again. His Majesty. No, His Grace the Duke might reconsider. So the envoy closed the door and left. The Viceroy collapsed into his chair with a sigh, and, soon, a letter from the Viceroy would be delivered to the Duke of Lerma. The Duke burns it in the fireplace and falls into deep thought. That's right. If the Viceroy changes and things become turbulent, the king's attention will be completely drawn to the New World. Looking at the situation broadly, it seemed remote to actually realize the plan of capturing the Queen in Roanoke. It appears to have been a more challenging task than initially thought. In such a situation, if the king's attention drifts away from the development projects in Valladolid, the newly established capital, that won't do. I've invested so much here. Then, his plan to amass huge profits by buying up lands around Valladolid would be disrupted. Perhaps, it might be a better option to keep the Viceroy in office for now. If he could divert the king's attention from New World affairs and make him focus on developing the new capital during that time, that would be the best for him. The Duke of Lerma's top priority wasn't the national finances being depleted by war, the complaints erupting from various places, the shaking royal authority, and so on. Right now, he had bought real estate, so it was time to raise its value. Tell the Viceroy. The Duke of Lerma finished his judgment and said to the envoy, it's not difficult for me to persuade His Majesty. He will remain in office. Understood, Your Grace. However, there must be no disturbance from the New World. The Duke of Lerma narrowed his brows and articulated clearly. Tell him to ignore Virginia or whatever and stay dead quiet. Tell him his term ends the day anything happens. Thus, Juan de Mendoza breathed a sigh of relief after hearing the story from the returned envoy. He had escaped the crisis, and, for the time being, Virginia was safe again. Felipe's foolishness and the Duke of Lerma's greed had made them safe again. Chapter 182. The Cross, the Crown, 1. It was quite a lengthy operation. It dragged on because the patient stubbornly insisted there was nothing wrong with him. The man with the cross immediately cleared away the instruments spread across the table. Though they were stained with blood and fat, he swept them into his bag without cleaning them. The surroundings were slightly dark, and being underground, the air was heavy and stagnant. But it couldn't be helped. If not for such a place, patients would escape. He looked down at the patient. A man trembling, with fingernails and teeth partially pulled out. The man with the cross had damaged his body but healed his soul. This patient's diagnosis was treason against the king and disobedience to his master. However, he had somewhat washed away his sins by leaking information about the cult he belonged to. Of course, it wouldn't change the fact that he would be hanged. You did well. The man with the cross quietly rose and muttered to himself to the patient who had not yet regained consciousness. The gilded crucifix hanging from his necklace swayed back and forth. As he stepped into the corridor, he heard shouts and banging on bars from all around. The man briefly stuffed cotton into his ears to block the piercing noise as he moved. After walking for a while, the man with the cross finally found himself in silence. He removed the cotton from his ears, opened and closed several doors, climbed stairs, and suddenly he was outside. How was it? An aide waiting outside asked the man with the cross. The man with the cross threw off his blood-soaked cloak and replied, Indeed. They all mentioned the name Nemo. The man with the cross carefully handed over a note and said, I've roughly summarized the information obtained from the prisoners. They all refused to talk easily, so I used rather rough methods. But when returning them to their masters, how should I? You don't need to worry about that. Most of them will die for treason, and only a few will return to their masters. The aide replied, taking the note that the man with the cross had handed him. It's unfortunate. Still, try to keep their limbs intact from now on if possible, so that more of them can return to their masters. Pardon. Well, isn't it pitiful? But they all refuse to talk easily. As I mentioned. Yes, you said they were part of some strange cult. Such fellows never open their mouths easily. Well, it can't be helped then. Do as you see fit. They're going to be hanged anyway. The two men parted ways after casually shaking off their compassion. The aide, who had received the note, shuddered at the smell of blood on his clothes, quickly brushed himself off, and headed to the governor's residence. After crossing several gates, corridors, and stairs again, the aide finally reached the office door. After knocking a few times, he heard a cough from inside and entered. And there, the aide faced Governor Pedro de Ibarra. He was exhaling with a sigh while tackling a mountain of paperwork. What is it? When the governor asked, the aide handed over the note and replied, Documents from the prison warden. Let's have a look. Spanish Florida, centered around St. Augustine, was growing larger. This was because investment in Florida had consistently been maintained through various viceroys. Already tens of thousands of Spaniards were living on this vast peninsula. As the native population gradually decreased due to epidemics, various pioneering farmers settled in the empty lands. And the base of this vast colony was right here, St. Augustine. Thanks to exceptional support policies over the past decade, just as tens of thousands of Spaniards had filled in, a large city with thousands of Spanish inhabitants had been built here. And saying that thousands and tens of thousands of Spaniards were living meant the same as saying that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Africans were living to support their lives. Governor Pedro commanded these hundreds of thousands of people. And the note held in Governor Pedro's hand contained information about those among that population who held somewhat treasonous thoughts. Pedro unfolded it and frowned. Nemo. Yes, it matches. Isn't Nemo the title of the Indian emperor that we hear about from England, France, and elsewhere? It seems that Virginia, or perhaps England behind it, is in contact with the slaves. Damn, those bastards again. In a way, it was a strange contradiction. In the original history, just a few decades from now, a militia composed of free black people would defend this place from England. There were no slaves in St. Augustine, which had no plantations as a military base, and thus runaway slaves from English colonies like Virginia were often liberated here. However, no one was able to appreciate the historical irony created by the arrival of a grape farmer here. Pedro merely rolled his eyes with an irritated gaze. They worship this Nemo as an angel, or think of him as a magician or spirit and revere him. Damn! Are the English using such vicious tactics to shake the minds of the slaves? The English, yes, could only be their tactics. Although the reality of the Indian Empire located in Virginia was gradually being revealed, they couldn't extend their influence all the way down here without England's help. They probably inserted Virginia into the narrative so they could deny it was their doing if this matter became public. Pedro gritted his teeth at such cunning. That wasn't the only problem. This is a matter where Viceroy must take some action. This is... No. Pedro cut off the aide's words. He pointed upward with his finger and said, There are orders to cover up everything related to Virginia for now. But we can't just leave it alone, can we? I suppose not. Saying this, Pedro twirled a pen in his hand, then took out a sheet of paper and began writing something. These aren't just a naturally occurring cult or group. There was clear external intervention, and simultaneously, they had an organization. One that presumptuously used priestly titles as position names. And at the same time, they were helping slaves escape to Virginia, so they must have contact points with the outside. If it were the movement of a formless cult, nothing could be done. But if there was a clear entity, that entity could be struck down, its breath cut off. Chapter 183. The Cross, the Crown, 2. So we'll resolve this internally. Announce this fact to the citizens of St. Augustine and all plantation owners in Florida. Demonic worship tendencies are intensifying among the slaves. This is not simply from the uncivilized customs peculiar to barbarians but has been injected by enemies of the kingdom. Therefore, all slave owners in Florida, as loyal subjects of Spain and as people serving the Lord, should guide them and, if possible, punish them firmly. Also, quickly report to the authorities if movements of devil worship are detected. Prohibit or thoroughly monitor collective activities of slaves. Under the governor's orders, such documents were distributed to numerous settlements. For the first time, Virginia's underground organization was surfacing. Virginia, land named after the Virgin Queen. Land where the mysterious emperor's empire is established. Land where brilliant wealth and opportunity await. And there, we finally found a place to poke into. I thought the Queen of England would at least check it. The Queen is not that stupid. Her power wasn't won in a card game. Henri IV was savoring the fact that he had finally secured a place for himself there. Normally, England would have checked him, because luxury goods from Virginia always came to Henri IV through Elizabeth. The profit margin Elizabeth gained in between was quite substantial, and even without considering that, the mere fact that England held the purse strings of Henri IV was a significant pressure. But the Queen remained still, because the trade monopoly no longer held meaning for the Queen. Anyway, now that James of Scotland had ascended to the joint throne, her monopoly had essentially collapsed. She doesn't waste resources on matters that won't benefit her, even if it would help the power of the kingdom, the continuation of the dynasty. As long as Elizabeth is the Virgin Queen, the Tudor dynasty is over. Therefore, she only needs to care about her happy retirement, the kingdom's prosperity or her own happiness. Elizabeth Tudor, the greatest monarch of England and the greatest monarch who will be remembered as such for the next few centuries, as if it were obvious, chose the latter. That woman is quite something. It must have been a decision she could make because she had no heirs to pass anything down to. Thinking this, Henri IV shook his head slightly with internal envy. Well, we've reaped our benefits in our own way. Now, isn't it time to think about what's next? What's next? One thing became certain due to the last incident. That the new king of Spain is a fool. Your Majesty discerned Felipe's weak inner nature and shook him up. It's an impressive feat even in retrospect. In fact, I didn't know. Pardon? No, I knew he was incompetent, but I didn't know it would be to that extent. I thought there would be more give and take. But anyway, the result was good. So isn't everything fine? The Marquis de Rosny, Maximilian de Bethune, once again reminded himself that his lord possessed the heart of a beast. After all, to continue being king after surviving so many assassination threats, one must have unusually swollen courage. Anyway, both men knew what had to be done next. We should seize the moment while Spain is so withdrawn. Yes, we must solidify the friendly relationship with Virginia. Even if sending an ambassador is too much, we must send a key figure as an envoy. And if we apply appropriate diplomatic pressure on Spain. Perfect. Henri IV clapped his hands and said, to show my friendship to the Emperor of the New World, I should send my most treasured subject. That would be right. And it would be good if it's someone who has some understanding of this situation. Can you cross the Atlantic? That was how Maximilian de Bethune came to arrive across the Atlantic. Indeed, France has sent an envoy, and it's the Marquis de Rosny, said to be the king's most favored subject. Is he such a great person? Of course, Mantio. It's no exaggeration to say that this man is currently supporting France. Go good heavens. That chunk of metal, what on earth is that? That's a tractor. It's used for plowing fields. My apostles and I watched the Marquis de Rosny through the window as he looked around with wide eyes. Oitoten was guiding him. He would control things so that the Marquis could only see a very small portion of Chesapeake Bay. Anyway, until just now, he had met with me and implied various matters. He expressed willingness to trade with Virginia even at some loss. He also proposed sharing the revenue generated from issuing royal licenses. But more than such trivial money games, I was concerned about the last part. Although it's written communication, your Latin is truly fluent. For Spain to threaten an empire ruled by such civilized people, true Christians, is a disgrace to Christendom. If they cross the line, the monarchs of all nations will punish them. He hinted at the willingness to take military action if Spain threatened Virginia beyond a certain level. That was enough for me. I already knew their difficult circumstances anyway. But then, what should we give in return? Don't we have nothing more to give them? I'm not sure if simply opening up trade a bit more would be sufficient. I'm not even sure if that would be beneficial to our livelihood. As White brought up the community's internal affairs beside me, I also became reluctant about expanding trade. So what should I do? Oytoten, I'd like to see those chickens you boasted about. Where is the chicken coop? That Marquis de Rosny person seems quite petty. No, he's doing it deliberately. Diplomatic rudeness is also a form of debt. He's reminding us of that debt. Diplomacy is quite gloomy. What's wrong, Nemo? When Eleanor asked me, I snapped my fingers and said, I've got it. A reciprocation that would give France great benefits without us suffering much loss. I watched Oytoten sweating profusely as he explained that the place where chickens were raised was off-limits. Once again, Oytoten would have work to do. Chapter 184. The King's Chicken 1. Henri IV, the rightful, legitimate, and only king of France, was enjoying each day lately. Listen to those greedy cheers and moans coming from all over France. How many francs is this? Nothing special.
Alto jeté 3000 livres.
Oh Lord, look at this quality. It has a different charm from Russian fur. The fur trade was flourishing. As a traditional European luxury item and necessity, it lived up to its reputation as a product that had always been a source of funds for Northern Europe and Russia. Once New World furs were released in various types and price ranges, the margins obtained in between were not to be taken lightly. Now we can get aluminum directly without importing it from England? Why is it so difficult to find a decent brooch? Well, the amount brought by licensed merchants is this much, but all the nobles in Paris are obsessed with getting it, so isn't that natural? When the same item is resold again and again, the price jumps several times in no time. Moreover, with the timely trend of the New World's white gold, aluminum, of course instigated by Henri himself, Henri once again seized the supply chain and reaped enormous profits. His strategic foresight had allowed him to monopolize this revolutionary metal before his European rivals fully grasped its potential. The lightweight yet strong material quickly became essential for both practical applications and as a symbol of wealth, commanding prices that rivaled gold. Savvy merchants under Henry's patronage established exclusive trading routes that funneled the precious resource directly to French ports, bypassing traditional trading hubs and their associated tariffs. On top of that, it was revealed that seedless grapes from the New World were not just English boasting or legend. These remarkable fruits, previously dismissed as tavern tales or exaggerated reports from dubious explorers, proved to be genuine agricultural marvels. French viticulturists, initially skeptical, soon became enthralled with the possibilities these unique cultivars presented, experimenting with crossbreeding them with traditional French varieties to create entirely new strains that thrived in the diverse regions of France. Their sweet wine also became an indispensable entertainment at banquets, selling like hotcakes. The distinctive flavor profile, a perfect balance of sweetness and complexity, with notes of exotic fruits, unknown to European palates, captivated the nobility across the continent. Courtiers and diplomats would specifically request these New World vintages, elevating their status from novelty to necessity at any gathering of importance. Merchants who secured even small quantities found themselves besieged by wealthy patrons willing to pay extraordinary sums. And the flow of all this trade rolled in Henri Ivy's hands. The debt that had seemed impossible to repay in this lifetime was gradually being cleared, and the empty royal treasury was slowly filling up. His desired rebuilding of France and the French monarchy was no longer a dream. Everything was thanks to exchanges with the New World, the mysterious native empire of Virginia. He couldn't help but think that things were going smoothly as they became allies. However, I too, as a chief, would be sad if I could only feed my tribe members 1 chicken per week. Not being able to eat 1 chicken every day. That's sad. Are there so few chickens here too? This is chicken? I thought it was a chick. Oh, it really was chicken. How fascinating. How did you raise it like this? Did you deliberately make it smaller? The taste is a bit lacking, but interesting. This was slightly too much. Of course, he understood the intention. By boasting of Virginia's overwhelming wealth, they sought to gain some advantage in future friendly relations. Such a move wasn't all bad. No, it was rather beneficial to him. Thanks to the narrative that a naive native chief inadvertently flaunted his prosperity. Attention focused on Virginia. And the phenomenon of attention focusing on Virginia was very beneficial to him, who was increasing his wealth through Virginia's luxury goods. But to go so far as to diminish my authority with exaggeration. Honestly, it was difficult to understand the intention. Anyway, isn't it like mocking and insulting his governance to his face? They have no idea how much effort he put into preventing rumors from spreading that Virginia's envoy had insulted the king. It couldn't have been an unintended action. Many who explored the New World said there were no chickens there. That's the conclusion reached by numerous people of various nationalities and statuses over the past decades. Spaniards, Frenchmen, Englishmen, Dutchmen, and so on. Of course, since they failed to discover the empire, their reliability should be reconsidered, but it was also uncomfortable to completely ignore their exploration results. Why on earth did he? Clearly, they were in trouble and in a position to ask for France's help. Could it be the emperor's intention? As his thoughts reached there, Henri Ivy's face hardened. Yes, the Christian monarch, fluent in Latin, French, and English, had spoken through Oytoten. Then that sudden diplomatic breach of etiquette and those absurd statements about feeding everyone chicken every day all make sense. Don't think you're above me even if I temporarily ask for help. I am in the position of bestowing my enormous wealth upon you. Thus, that native emperor was whispering in Henry's ear. Is he being bold because the Atlantic serves as a barrier between us? Or is there really something else? Thinking about the latter possibility, Henri IV suddenly shuddered. That powerful emperor who repelled Spain and wielded influence throughout the eastern coast of North America. He must have other powers. He had extended his hand to Henri IV while simultaneously warning him not to underestimate him. Your Majesty, the Marquis de Rosny enters the palace. Finally, he returns. Just then, a servant opened the door and announced the return of Maximilian de Bethune, who had been sent to Virginia. Henri IV nodded to himself, steeling his resolve. The relationship with Virginia is important, but the king's dignity is equally important. This time he wouldn't yield. Whatever story the Marquis de Rosny brought, he would not be shaken. With that in mind, he proceeded to the court and, I didn't expect you to return? He was momentarily taken aback upon seeing Oytoten standing beside the Marquis de Rosny. Oytoten laughed awkwardly, and the Marquis explained on his behalf. Your Majesty, they have apologized for the previous diplomatic breach and have sent a gift to foster our friendly relations. Chapter 185. The King's Chicken, 2. Somehow, the Marquis's face was also covered in cold sweat. Between them was a cloth-covered box that kept rattling, suggesting something alive was inside. Due to the Marquis's strange demeanor, Henri tried to make eye contact with him a few times. But, for some reason, he avoided eye contact. Henri sensed something ominous in the increasingly strange atmosphere. What on earth is making everyone act this way? A gift of friendship. Flutter. As Oytoten gestured, other natives around immediately lifted the box and removed the cloth. Henri bent forward to see the contents up close. The Marquis hung his head, and Oytoten seemed somewhat proud. And, Flutter, cock-a-doodle-doo. Everyone in the court fell silent. Inside the box was a chicken. It was several times larger than an ordinary chicken, as if it had devoured a whole pig. And this is a gift sent by our emperor. I was ordered to teach how to raise these. Enough! Henri Ivy's face trembled and turned crimson. This goes too far. This is unacceptable no matter what. To openly present one superior chicken and mock him like this. The talk about feeding chicken once a week wasn't a simple declaration but a major proclamation supporting his public popularity. He was being ridiculed. Now was no time to worry about friendly relations or anything else. If he didn't respond here, his authority would be in danger. And even without weighing gains and losses, this joke isn't funny at all. Henri IV was barely containing his anger. As far as I know, there were no chickens in the New World until Europeans arrived. Thus, for your chickens to be so large as to regard our chickens as chicks is. He raised his trembling hand to point at the chicken and spoke quietly but distinctly, and, creak, the audience chamber door opened again. Amid the commotion, a large cage suddenly entered the palace. Inside, dozens of chicks were running around everywhere. They were all about the size of ordinary French chickens. These are chicks about 2 weeks old. They hatched on the ship. I didn't quite hear what was just said. The chicken's clucking was too loud. Oytoten spoke, and the murmurs in the court momentarily ceased. All eyes focused on Henri IV. Henri IV was momentarily dazed. Then, ahem, clearing his throat. Welcome back to France. He spread his arms with a somewhat awkward smile. Equals. Since there were originally no chickens on the North American continent, Kin Issei saith unto them, Children, lay many eggs and grow robustly. After the original 2 mothers, Coke and Coco, laid eggs like mad, and their children laid eggs, then hatched offspring and kept repeating this cycle. Cluck, cock-a-doodle, cackle, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck-cluck. Gurk, cluck, cackle, cack, cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cackle, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, gurk, cackle, cack, cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cackle, cluck, cack, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cackle. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of chickens were growing everywhere. At one point, there was a crisis of food shortage, and we tried to reduce their numbers as much as possible to also reduce the amount of grain for feed, but the reproductive capacity of chickens was so great that it made all those efforts seem like a mere happening. With exponentially increasing numbers, some tribes have established rules like eating eggs daily or chicken meat daily to control the chicken population. And those who were initially in charge of raising and breeding all these chickens were Oytoten's tribe. It was just right. Cluck cluck, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck. Taking just a few hundred from these numerous chickens wasn't particularly disadvantageous to us. It even helped control the population. People were starting to get tired of chicken meat. Cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cackle, cack, cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck. If such light assistance helps improve relations with France, that's more beneficial. At the same time, showing off our wealth and abundance, what profit our friendly relations will bring in the future. Cock-a-doodle-doo, cluck, cluck cluck, cackle, cluck, cack, cackle, cack. It's noisy. I stuffed cotton in my ears and looked around. Generally, the first month of growth is most important for broiler chickens. That's when chicks become chickens. This place maintains a warm temperature of over 30 degrees Celsius year-round. continuously raising and breeding chickens. Because chickens don't handle cold well, they breed vigorously and lay eggs in summer. As I walked a bit and left the chicken coop, I soon saw boxes being kept warm with straw and cloth. Despite winter approaching, they're kept warm by burning fuel, because each of those boxes contains eggs. And after 21 days, chicks will hatch inside. It's a simple incubator. By the way, were there incubators in this era? There's no way to know since the invention date of artificial incubators isn't listed in the catalog. Well, I've left it to Oytoten, so he'll handle it well. This time, equals. A simple Virginia-style chicken farm was soon built in France, and Henri went to visit it on his land. When he encountered Oytoten, who was managing the place, he asked with a somewhat ominous feeling, "What is this?" Henri IV immediately regretted asking. It felt as if Oytoten's expression changed to that of a teenager from some peace-loving island nation in the east that he had never visited. It was somehow an unpleasantly arrogant expression. It seemed like Oytoten might mutter something like, "Ah, so this France doesn't have this yet?" in a low voice, and if Henri asked what it was, he would reply, "Oh, it's nothing." Of course, that didn't happen, but, I see you don't know. This is something called an incubator. It's used to hatch eggs. For some reason, he felt like he should respond with, "Hey, amazing, right? Have you never seen something like this?" Naturally, Henri didn't say that, but he continued to feel uneasy. Chapter 186. Clever Deception 1. In a splendid room of the Tuileries Palace. Chief, are you all right? What are you pondering?
No.
I'm just turning some thoughts over in my mind. There, Oytoten paced around the room with furrowed brows. He couldn't seem to come up with a good strategy. Oytoten had crossed the Atlantic with a weighty mission. A mission to strengthen the alliance between Virginia and France, and to expand the Virginia community's influence over France and Henri IV. "I trust only you. Use whatever means necessary, as long as they aren't immoral. I trust you." His mission was important, as none other than Nemo himself had said these words. It was a path to find a new ally to face the Spanish threat together and connect Europe with their community. However, he still hadn't achieved any notable success since building the chicken farm and raising chickens. This wouldn't do. Nemo was counting on him, and tens of thousands of people in the community were depending on his shoulders. Isn't there some clever way to move forward? In the case of chickens, it was quite successful, but it was largely due to chance. The situation had developed where everyone had expectations about giant chickens from the New World because his unintended mistake had spread by word of mouth. Now he needed a different approach. Chickens weren't the only goods he had brought to expand influence in France. He had brought wine bottles, and various other necessities. "Chief, indeed, is that the only way? Have you thought of something?" "Yes, I've made a decision." The tribesmen who had come to assist the chief briefly recalled what had happened the last time their chief made a decision. He had tried to extort the Powhatan tribe by bringing refugees from Roanoke Island. The tribe had nearly disappeared from the face of the earth as a result. Cold sweat suddenly ran down the tribesmen's backs. They tried to dissuade the chief, but Oytoten continued with a hearty laugh. "Don't worry. This method is already proven. It can't fail or go wrong." This made them feel even more ominous. Soon, it was time for the banquet at the Tuileries Palace. Henri IV had been engaging in a peculiar behavior lately when moving around. By God's grace, His Majesty Henri IV, King of France and Navarre, enters. Whether in court or when inspecting outside the Tuileries Palace, there was always a leashed creature following by his side. That creature was Flutter, cock-a-doodle-doo. Take there. It's a chicken bigger than a dog. For real. A chicken. And one from Virginia at that.
No.
To think such a chicken really exists. Lord have mercy. With one that size, catching just one would feed a whole family with plenty to spare. The French had been enthusiastic about this for a long time. The chicken farm established by the mysterious envoy from the New World had already become a must-see course for nobles. If God grants me more life, I will ensure there isn't a laborer in my kingdom who can't afford to have a chicken in his pot on Sunday.
Si Dieu me donne encore de la vie, je ferai qu'il n'y aura point de laboureur en mon royaume qui n'ait moyen d'avoir le dimanche une poule dans son pot.
That giant chicken was a symbol of the catchphrase Henri IV had put forward when he took the throne. At the same time, it was a symbol of the success of Henri IV's newly launched New World policy. In other words, this giant chicken had become a symbol of French royal authority. Everyone marveled and looked up to this giant chicken and the abundance of the New World it symbolized, just as they would look up to Henri IV. And in a short time, the expanded chicken farm and the new breed of chickens sold at high prices to various regions were served at banquets, providing joy to nobles. But such a situation would be temporary. Chickens are creatures with vigorous reproductive ability, so it wouldn't be long before those giant chickens adorned dining tables across France. With a bit of exaggeration, there might truly be no subject who couldn't eat chicken every Sunday. Cluck, cluck. Yes, eat well, Coco. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Ah. Just looking at this fellow makes me feel full. Henri took advantage of this opportunity by carrying around a robust chicken every day, and eventually became attached to it, making it his pet. Watching it peck at grain placed in a luxurious glass bowl, Henri was pleased, and the Marquis de Rosny, Maximilien de Bethune, stared at him blankly for a moment before clearing his throat and calling his lord. Ahem, ahem.
Ah, Maximilien.
You're here? What is it? The servants said you wouldn't come no matter how much they called. It's almost time for the banquet. Ah, is it that time already? Suddenly, Henri makes a sour expression as he rises from beside Coco. When Coco looks up at its owner in confusion, Henri strokes its head and clicks his tongue. If it's a banquet, the envoy will be there too. Well, your expression doesn't look good. Did something happen? No, I just have a strange feeling. Perhaps it's because of that incident at the last banquet. That incident. The moment when he heard, "Your kingdom is poor," in front of everyone. Of course, it was later revealed to be a misunderstanding, but he couldn't count how many days he had been stressed because of it. For some reason, he felt uneasy and uncomfortable whenever meeting Oytoten again after that. Ah, you don't know? This is something called an incubator. I see you don't know. It's all right. France, too, like us, can soon become wealthy. France as a country, poor but the people are kind. It's certainly polite, but somehow I feel a condescending gaze that makes me uncomfortable inside. It's like something scraping away at my insides. I understand what you mean, but should you be wary of an important ally's envoy because of that? Yes, you're right. Henri lightly pats Maximilien's shoulder before opening the door and stepping out. You're right. After all, hasn't he brought us enormous wealth? Henri soon straightened his shoulders and walked towards the banquet hall with dignified steps. Yes. Come to think of it, didn't even that Oytoten fellow's insult eventually prove helpful? Moreover, and most importantly, there was no intentionality. The subsequent words were also unsettling, but there was considerable room to view them as minor verbal mistakes by an envoy ignorant of European diplomacy, or misunderstandings due to cultural differences. Yes, let's not worry about it. With that thought, Henri entered the banquet hall alongside the Marquis de Rosny. The table was lavishly decorated with chicken dishes, symbolizing friendship with Virginia and the prosperity of both countries. And in the seat directly to the right of the king's place of honor, Oytoten was waiting for him. Chapter 187. Clever Deception 2. Henri smiled at Oytoten as he sat down, and after several ceremonial greetings and speeches, they all raised their glasses and drank wine. Long live France! Long live the Emperor of the New World! Glory to the friendship between our nations! Thus Henri boldly downed his wine, and, ugh! Hearing a sudden sound, he lowered his glass and turned his head. Looking to the side, he saw Oytoten hastily putting down his wine glass and rinsing his mouth with water. What's wrong? It's sad. and His Majesty the King is admirable. Feeling somewhat ominous, Henri asked again. Thank you. But why are you sad? Then Oitoten said, the king personally eating such tasteless wine. The kingdom's situation must be very difficult. The banquet hall stirred again. Henri IV broke into a cold sweat and, perhaps it was a slip of the tongue? I was ignorant of your culture. I apologize. He thought he saw the corner of Oitoten's mouth turn up ever so slightly. When he blinked, Oitoten's expression had returned to its original calm and solemn state. Here, as a sign of apology, Virginia produced wine. Oitoten suddenly rummaged through a box beside him and lifted something up. It was a bottle, containing a clear liquid that gave off a fruity aroma. Not intense and sweet like last time. It's ordinary wine. It's been aged about 4 years, but I'd like to share it with the people here. What are you saying, Chief Oitoten? If it's ordinary wine, there's no way it would remain intact after 4 years. Taste it, then you'll know.
Pour.
Oh.
Pour.
What is this taste? It's incredible. Chief, may I ask for another glass? 1 glass at a time. 1 glass at a time. Cheers and shouts erupt every time Virginia-produced ordinary wine is delivered to people at the banquet. Soon the meal ended, and it became time for the ball where people gathered to dance and converse. Lords who each claimed to own a vineyard all gathered around Oitoten, buzzing with excitement. How were you able to keep the wine so perfectly intact while crossing the Atlantic? Is there some superior Virginia technology applied to it as well? And before these buzzing people, Oitoten claps his hands to focus attention and speaks. You people didn't have this. Clap. As Oitoten claps his hands again, servants bring and open the box he had entrusted to them. Inside was a white powder. What is this? Don't you know? This is something called sulfites. Somehow Oitoten's tone of speech began to change unpleasantly, but for now they listened quietly. If you add this, wine can be preserved for a long time. Then, if we just have that, would you like to buy it? Yes, I'll buy it immediately. Give us that powder. We too can make fresh wine. If we just had that, we could also make such wine.
No.
What did you say? That alone is not enough. Clap. Oitoten claps his hands again. The servant brings another box and opens it. This time it was full of glass bottles. These are our standardized wine bottles. They can preserve wine neatly. I'll buy them. Now if we really just had those, it won't work. Something else is needed. Use cork as a stopper. RK. Yes, and while you're at it, I'd like you to supply us with cork produced in France. And, clap. Oitoten claps his hands again, and, buy this cork cutter. In Virginia, we cut cork with this. But if you seal the bottle tightly with cork, how do you open it? Clap. Buy this corkscrew. In Virginia, we open cork with this. Oh. Henri foresees something happening before his eyes, but his brain momentarily fails to interpret the situation and becomes paralyzed. By the way, I'd like to apologize to everyone for my earlier rudeness, especially to His Majesty the King. And he sees the corner of Oitoten's mouth twitch up for a brief moment again. Others didn't seem to notice. Only then does Henri Iv's brain start working again to grasp the situation. That bastard is enjoying this. Equals. The most important thing in the long-term preservation of wine is blocking oxidation. It's commonly said that improperly stored old wine turns into vinegar. This is precisely the phenomenon that occurs when wine oxidizes excessively through contact with oxygen. This problem became prominently highlighted after the pioneering of new sea routes and the dawn of the Age of Discovery, as Europeans began to spread all over the world. Because transporting wine by ship became frequent. Wine is essential for the Eucharist or Holy Communion, major rituals in Christianity. This beverage, which goes beyond a simple necessity to carry religious significance, was something Europeans had to bring along even when traveling to America, Africa, or Asia. Along with this, fortified wines like port or sherry, which don't spoil easily, emerged, and storage methods that block oxygen, like glass bottles and cork stoppers, became fashionable. And in the modern era, to more thoroughly prevent oxidation from occurring, sulfites began to be added. Our family runs a grape farm. In other words, we have sulfur fumigators for grape protection at home. Until now, we've been using them to prevent wood from rotting when building ships. There's also sodium carbonate or soda. This is something found in most households. In other words, sulfites can be made without much difficulty. Sulfites are substances commonly used as food preservatives. They're added to most sausages and hams. And when added to wine, they remove oxygen from the wine, inhibit bacterial growth, prevent wine oxidation, and help with long-term wine preservation. Even wineries that typically avoid adding substances that affect taste and aroma mostly use sulfites, indicating their usefulness. That's why our wine could cross the Atlantic without necessarily being fortified wine. That was the strength of our wine. Swoosh. Add very little. 1 spoonful per barrel is enough. Move all the oak barrels. We'll reuse them. This is the Chesapeake Wine Factory. On one side, fortified wines are aging in oak barrels, and on the other side, sulfites are being added to regular wine, which is then slowly bottled into sterilized glass bottles. For now, we're gradually reducing production. In the early 17th century, brandy already exists, and wine glass bottles are spreading bit by bit, so it won't be long before fortified wine emerges. Instead, we plan to supply those sulfites, glass bottles, and cork-related tools everywhere. How successful that will be depends on Oytoten, and last time he inadvertently promoted, Virginia produced chickens with somewhat radical speech and behavior, but this time there won't be any issues. He is a chief after all. It'll probably be fine. Chapter 188. Holy Cooperative 1. Oytoten returned, and he reported to me. Well, I've already heard everything. Due to some shortcomings of the tribesmen accompanying me, I'm not sure if they properly conveyed the underlying intentions of my diplomatic approach. They conveyed it properly. Then, are you in your right mind? This crazy man, irritating the French king right to his face? How did I end up sending this man? All right, among the natives, he had experience working as a diplomat, because he'd been to Elizabeth's court. Why did I send this man to Elizabeth's court? There weren't many natives around me who had a certain status and were familiar with Europeans. But why was that man around me? How did I meet him? Why did I trust him? Why did I trust a man who, betting everything on one shot, not only staked his own life but also the lives of his entire tribe, spinning the Daki life slot machine? I barely suppressed the bubbling in my stomach and let out deep sighs. Calm down. You're an angel. An angel shouldn't swear and throw things when angry. In any case, wasn't the result good? All the wine-related items we brought sold out completely. I'm sorry. Correct. That should have been said first. I told him not to make verbal mistakes, but he deliberately spewed words that sounded like verbal mistakes. What's more irritating is that the outcome was actually good. Even I didn't think all those corkscrews I gave him would sell. I just told him to sell them slowly. Moreover, he improvised and found people to supply cork stably instead of Spain and Portugal, so that was good too. Since he hadn't directly disobeyed my orders, and the results were good, it was awkward to keep holding him. With that thought, I softened, and Oytoten, who had lowered his head, raises it slightly and whispers to me. Everyone loved the wine made with Sijui. Don't do it. All the nobles, setting aside the Bordeaux or Burgundy wines you always mention, begged me for just one more sip. I said don't do it. The faces of the French grape producers, pleading and crying to get the sulfite powder from me, were so pitiful. Jarrrrrrrr. The corners of my mouth, which I was trying my best to keep in place, automatically twitched upward. Damn, where did he learn that I'm weak to such stories? It's already too late. My mind is already filled with images of French people crying and making a fuss after drinking wine made from my grapes, overshadowing Oytoten's antics. My grapes won. Our Sijui beat Sauvignon Blanc. Do you know what this means? How would it feel the Japanese market conquered the world like One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach? Or if a domestic independent film crushed all Hollywood blockbusters and dominated the North American box office? I barely suppressed the nationalist pride and dopamine rising in my chest for a Japan that doesn't even exist yet. So, after I closed my eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and opened them again, heh, hee, how pitiful they looked. I see Oytoten laughing even more sinisterly than me. Ah, that wasn't meant to appease me. He was just proud of himself. Looking around, I saw the other apostles wearing embarrassed expressions. I let out a sigh and spoke to Oytoten, who was still chuckling. It's partly my oversight for not instructing you beforehand, so let's leave it at this. I hope there won't be any mistakes next time. Understood, Nemo. Thank you. I'll take my leave now. He speaks well. After Oytoten left, the morning schedule seemed roughly complete. As I turned around to ask about the next schedule, Hewitt approached and said, "Today, you only have a tour of the Knight's outpost on the outskirts left. In other words, today is a day to take the porter and inspect for a few hours. Today, I'll need to stay out overnight. Fortunately, the camper has been restored." I quietly sighed and stepped outside the meeting hall. I have a lot of tiring things to do today. A young priest rode alone to the Knight's outpost in a remote location near Pamlico Sound. After soothing his tired horse by stroking its mane, the priest dismounted and immediately handed a document to the guard who was killing time in front of the outpost. "Your name is Thomas Ashard." "Yes, that's correct. You're from Croton, but you're going north to Minister." "That's right. I want to be with the employees of the trading post being dispatched to distant places, and the converts nearby." After confirming his purpose of visit and address, the guard of the Knight's outpost makes a somewhat perplexed expression and says, "Why? There's a reason for such a response. The term Croton person takes on various meanings depending on the context. First, among the natives, it refers to people from Mantios tribe. They are called the Croton tribe and mostly handle the community's administrative tasks. In another context, it also refers to all the people of the community. It originated from various natives around Chesapeake Bay, casually calling the new community people Croton people. However, the most frequent and common meaning within the community is the people of the nameless one who actually reside in Croton. Among the English, the first 30 or so who arrived at Croton Island following Eleanor's guidance. Among the natives, the 200 or so tribespeople of Manteo who were the first to join the community. And about 100 Spaniards who were once enemies of the community but now work as sailors or fishermen. These are the people of Croton, the people who first followed him. Those who tread the land of the holy place, build houses there and live there. Of course, even now, anyone who wants can build a house in the empty spaces of Croton Island, register, and live there. The community is a free place. There are no laws preventing anyone from living anywhere. However, everyone secretly showed special respect to those who were close to him, those who followed him first. Unless there was a special reason, no one would dare to easily set foot in Croton. The guard had entered there once for work. It was like paradise. Endless vineyards covered most of the island, and peaceful houses built with the same materials as his house were spread all around. Abandoning all that peace, that honor, to go to the north where proper development hasn't even been done? Not understanding, the guard tilted his head, and the young priest Ashard smiled awkwardly. "I just wanted to go." That could be. Chapter 189. Holy Cooperative, 2. The guard didn't seem to agree with Ashard's words at all, but he answered that way and stepped aside. Then, a not too large but sturdy fortress of the Knights, built by piling rocks, came into view. The low, square fortress had tall watchtowers at each corner, and each watchtower had cranes hanging high to transport grain sacks and machine parts. Inside, something else rose high, which he recognized as a silo for storing grain. It was the identity of the agricultural knights and a tower symbolizing the abundance of the vicinity. Ashard's eyes sparkled. As the young priest took steps toward it, the gates opened to the left and right. The first thing that caught his eye was the inner courtyard. Always wear gloves when touching anything heavy, sharp, or hot. This will prevent your hands from being injured. But when touching something that moves quickly, to avoid getting sucked in, always cover your mouth and nose with cloth when touching the boiler room. This is to prevent the rough ash dust from damaging your lungs. There, 5 or 6 technicians were handling it, while muttering various safety precautions and accident prevention measures. A tractor. The fact that there was a tractor inside meant that they were also inside. Everyone, is the inspection finished? Ah, Sir Hind. Indeed, walking from there. A knight walking with a shining aluminum medal on his chest, and his apprentices. If it's progressed somewhat, let's depart as is. Not possible. The nameless one said it is right to let the tractor rest once every week. Of course, this isn't some Bible verse and could be omitted, but since the boiler room's condition isn't good, let's postpone the work if possible. But I wanted to clear about 7 hectares of area by today if possible. 7 hectares is more than 17 acres, an enormous area. The knight's pride in his technical skills was evident in his statement about clearing it in a day. As he was watching blankly, everyone's attention turned to him. Ashard, his face reddening, quickly bowed his head and tried to leave, but the knight and technicians called to him. You there? Ah, soy. I apologize for being rude. Are you the prospective priest who was to come here? The one going north? Ah, yes. They told me to learn whatever I could, be it technology or farming, for a few days since I'm going to the frontier. In the north, everyone handles everything. Trading post employees officiate masses, priests prepare ledgers, and repair simple machinery. That's how it is for everyone. A newly established trading post has few people but many tasks. You're young but volunteering for such hardship impressive. Not at all. But where is Father Milton, who was said to be here? Building multiple large structures on the frontier was a luxury. It was common for knights' outposts and churches to be attached. Therefore, hearing the young priest looking for a priest at the knight's headquarters, they naturally pointed to an inner room. The father is helping with our knight's ledger organization over there. He's also reporting on the situation of the nearby parish, which is his original duty. Thank you. Saying this, Ashard hurried along. He passed through a corridor strewn with simple angel murals and crucifixes, and entered the inner area. A sense of tension needlessly stirred Ashard's heart. He had seen so many sights unseen on Croton Island. The knight's outpost, the knights, the steam tractor. Everything was new. Everything excited him. Full of anticipation, he stood at the corner of the corridor that turned right, and there was a door. The holy commandment for humanity was engraved above it. As he stared intently at that phrase, the sound of a pen and paper rustling leaked out from beyond the door. Soon, the sound of a chair being dragged was heard, and the door opened. Fling. An Algonquin woman in priest's attire smiles, forming crow's feet, and says, I felt a presence and came out to find a young person I haven't seen before. Father Milton, I am Father Ashard, going to minister in the Mohawk territory. I came here to learn. Ah, you're that young and audacious fellow who's going north. Quite gutsy. In her hand was a chart labeled, This Quarter's Outpost 17 Harvest Report. Father Milton quietly smiled and led Ashard back to the corridor he had walked through. Father Milton led him to a room near the entrance, and when he opened the door, there was a neatly placed wooden desk, bed, bookshelf, and writing instruments. I heard you were going to help with our work here? Yes, that's right. Then from tomorrow, could you help organize the harvest volumes of each field spread around our outpost? I'd appreciate it. Of course. Ah, yes. How diligent. For now, you've had a hard time riding all the way here until evening today, so rest. Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to the people living here and teach you how to work. Thank you, Father. In response to Ashard's greeting, Father Milton smiles and closes the door. Looking around the room, the sun was setting outside the window facing south. Below it, the still green wheat field swayed peacefully. And, vroom, a familiar noise reaches his ears. Wondering, he looks outside. That wagon, a wagon dyed the color of the blue sea, was speeding along the path between the wheat fields. Through that window he sees his holy face. When he stuck his face out the window, he recognized him and waved. Thomas Ashard. Ah, he uses honorifics with him despite having watched him since childhood. Although he looks younger than Ashard knows he has lived for an immeasurable long time. This sacred fortress, this mysterious outpost, that he would come here, Ashard's heart trembled. Equals. I chewed on a moderately boiled potato while looking at the outpost in front of me. There were 2 knights, 9 apprentices, 12 technicians, 1 priest, and 1 tractor. Perhaps because it wasn't very large, the modest stone wall caught my eye. When I parked the car, the priest, knights, and technicians ran out in socks to greet me. When I quietly requested this quarter's harvest data, they said it wasn't ready yet. So instead, I checked the tractor's condition. It seems you handle it a bit roughly when changing direction. That's right. Habitually, without realizing. Please be careful from now on.
Understood.
About staying overnight at our outpost.
I'm fine.
I'll sleep in my car. After checking the grain volume in the silo and the condition of other equipment, I quickly made way and said, "Is the agricultural equipment rental working properly?" These days, since most work is done with the tractor, there isn't much of that. There's no need to do with the tractor what other farmers can do. Please focus on expanding the newly cultivated land first. I'll keep that in mind. Sir Powell? Yes. How is the development in this vicinity progressing? The agricultural equipment rental business isn't yet successful, but the new road project nearby is actively underway. Also, the potato seedling distribution and fertilizer business. A knight's outpost. I looked around for a moment. If I just changed the cross and angel-drawn flag to a familiar green background with a yellow mark. It's a regional agricultural cooperative. I nodded in satisfaction, seeing that the agricultural cooperative here was also running well. In one corner, a wooden panel engraved with the motto for humanity was displayed. Somehow it was like, "Let's live well." Chapter 190. The angels share one. Vroom. Bump. Bump. It's too obvious, but my Porter isn't made for off-roading. And in our settlement, there's barely anything that could be called a proper road by my standards. Then what lies beyond the settlement is predictable. Wetlands, grasslands, hills, forests, wetlands, grasslands, hills, forests. Screech. Today, this is as far as I go. So even if I travel just 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers, avoiding wetlands and various obstacles means I can't go as fast as on paved roads. Especially on days like today when I'm traveling around the borders, my travel distance becomes even shorter. It's impossible to finish the work today. I clicked my tongue and tapped the map with my finger. Nameless one, would you like to stay here overnight? No, I can't trouble you all. Sleeping in my car is enough for me. I answered while parking my Porter slightly away from the small fortress. After walking around to check the surroundings and confirming my privacy, I unfolded the awning. Click, click, whoosh. I also lit a fire. Clatter, clatter. I took out various cooking utensils. In just a few more years, it will be 20 years since I came here. The time when I desperately missed rice with soy sauce, marinated crab, and seasoned squid has passed. My taste buds and lifestyle have already adapted to the diet here. I routinely took out eggs, checked their freshness, lightly oiled the frying pan, and cracked the eggs. Sizzle. I stirred the eggs with fairly long wooden chopsticks, added chopped onions, carrots, and cheese, and my vegetable cheese omelet was complete. In another frying pan, I spread butter and placed sliced white bread, which is precious, to make toast. As the beef stew boiled in the pot, I transferred it to a bowl. That's how tonight's dinner was completed. Buttered white bread, omelet, beef stew. Glug, glug. And to top it off, fortified wine from Chesapeake. For a moment, I gazed at my folding table with emotion. I'm getting closer to a 21st century dining table. Of course, I can't even dream of proper Japanese food and can't eat white rice. But as the community grows, my standard of living gradually improves. Even if I can't eat the Japanese food I knew from the 21st century, I can at least somewhat imitate Western food. Feeling moved by this fact, I ate a piece of beef from the stew. It's good. It must be far inferior to 21st century beef, but that taste is now a distant memory, so it's fine. After gobbling up the stew, omelet, and white bread spread with Shine Muscat jam, I felt pretty good. Sitting in my expensive camping chair bought from Helix Knox, I stared at the fire for a long time until the sun set and stars appeared. Pop. Now as I open Chesapeake wine for dessert, its sweet and slightly bitter taste spreads in my mouth, relieving the fatigue throughout my body. In this drowsy state, if I fall asleep looking at the starry sky through the skylight, it's an ideal auto-camping. Since it's winter and might be cold, I've already laid an electric heating pad on the bed. Hoo. This is the result of all kinds of hardships over the past 10+ years. Just thinking about how my last camper flew away gives me chills. Back then, right before the hurricane hit, my car flipped over and it was chaos. This small luxury can be considered a modest reward for enduring knife wounds, hurricanes, and all sorts of hardships. I sip wine, and just as I'm about to fall asleep, I drink coffee again to wake myself up. I can't just end this rare leisure time. Since I have a body that handles drinking alcohol and coffee together just fine, I might as well push it a bit. As I nodded off holding a wine glass while warming myself by the fire, I suddenly thought, do I have any stronger alcohol? I'm starting to get tired of drinking the same wine all the time. I rolled up the blanket I was covered with, put it on the chair, and wobbled toward the camper. And then, squeak! I took out a box, opened it, and examined its contents. What do I have? A small oak barrel. When I shake it, I hear a sloshing sound. Should I open it? No, it's only been a year. Even my wines haven't been aged over 10 years yet, so if I open it now, I'll regret it later. Let's age it for at least 3 more years before trying it. Click. Well, it's not like I can't put it back after opening it, unlike wine. I poured the light brown liquid from the oak barrel into a cup and tasted it. Gulp. Ugh, the smell of alcohol. As expected, it still doesn't taste good. Let's put it back. I closed the lid of the oak barrel again and sealed it tightly in the box. Then I lay down on the bed. After drinking high-proof alcohol, I started feeling sleepy. What's the identity of the alcohol I just opened? It's whiskey. == 3 years ago from now. It was around the time when Elizabeth gifted the joint throne to James of Scotland. As far as I know, that's when Scottish people officially started coming to Virginia. You say you're an angel descended to Earth? Such nonsense. How many acres of land did you say you're distributing? The Scottish people were tempted to come here for fertile and vast lands instead of the barren, hilly lands of their homeland. As such, as soon as they arrived, they focused on land reclamation and farming, and wherever hundreds of Scottish people went, vast barley fields soon spread out. Moreover, with their enthusiasm combined with Virginia's advanced farming methods, wheat and barley became increasingly abundant. While excess wheat was exported to England, most barley was consumed here, so vast quantities accumulated. So the Scottish people processed the excess barley as they traditionally did. They brewed alcohol, fermenting sprouted barley to make barley alcohol, then distilling it to make a spirit. That's the famous whiskey. Click. Gulp. In Japan, whiskey was expensive to drink due to import price plus 20% customs duty, 72% liquor tax, 30% education tax, 10% value-added tax. But here in Virginia, I can drink it as much as I want. That's better than 21st century Japan. Chapter 191. The Angel's Share, 2. Of course, the Scottish people are still trying to adapt to the climate and environment of North America, so they haven't quite got the hang of making alcohol yet. Although they haven't been here long, so the whiskey aging hasn't even reached 3 years yet. There was one thing that allowed me to be satisfied enough. I have plenty of time. In as little as 10 years, or at least 30 years, something good should come out. Plus, the casks, oak barrels that held fortified wine are directly shipped from Chesapeake. How great is that? There's no tax imposed on brewing alcohol here. We didn't have taxes in the first place. So Scottish people don't need to secretly brew alcohol to avoid taxes. Of course, they don't have proper distillation techniques yet, and they don't know that whiskey aged in casks for years tastes good. But that's exactly what I can overcome with my future cheat. I've already ordered the Scottish people that all whiskey must be aged in casks for at least 3 years, so they will mostly follow it. Thanks to me, the world's alcohol culture takes another big step forward. Why did he tell us to store whiskey for a long time? Because there's not enough Angel's Share? Angel's Share, a term metaphorically referring to the whiskey that evaporates during barrel aging. Was that really taken by angels? A strange legend spreads among the Scottish people in Virginia. Anyway, even after mixing whiskey and wine the day before, I could wake up refreshingly. It's been over 10 years since I last felt a hangover. Looking at the clock, I still had time. Then let's go check it out. When I started the porter, dozens of birds sitting on a nearby pond took flight simultaneously. Watching that spectacle, I opened the catalog. The Immortal Order series is originally an open-world action-adventure RPG. And as is common with such open-world games, one of the main contents is sightseeing. Especially Fansuku Software's open-world games are famous for their map design that allows players to naturally enjoy the scenery while climbing nearby highlands to reveal the map. So, there's this. Flip. Beautiful natural landscapes throughout North America, including Virginia. Here it is. Although I've read this catalog dozens of times, I've hardly ever looked at this part until now. Why? Why indeed? Where would I have found time to wander around scenic spots like some leisure-seeking immortal? Until now, I've been incredibly busy farming, handling administrative work, stopping fights between natives, preventing sectarian conflicts among Christians, escaping near burning at the stake, preparing for plague outbreaks in London. Anyway, I've been insanely busy. But not anymore. I don't know what will happen later, but right now everything is stable. Minor conflicts are resolved in Parliament, and even smaller matters are handled by each community. Administrative work is shared between me and the apostles, each with their own responsibilities, and there are dozens of support staff as well. I no longer need to farm alone, struggling with a tractor. Now we have more than 20 tractors, so it won't be a critical problem if I'm missing. That's right. As the community grows, my free time increases. As the community grows, the only thing left for me to do is make major decisions. It's like how a village headman of a few hundred people can be as busy as the president of Japan, even though Japan is tens of thousands of times larger than the village. My work will probably continue to decrease. That's the right and desirable direction. Even though I've insisted that my will is not God's will, I still have religious authority incomparable to ordinary humans. But in the end, I'm just a human who lives long, has infinite resources, and has foresight and universal translation abilities. Not a god or angel. Of course, summarizing it like this makes me sound very angel-like. Still, I'm not omnipotent, am I? It would be best for everyone if my interventions are minimized going forward. This is absolutely not because I want some rest. It's not because after frantically working for about 10 years, I no longer want any power. It's not because after being stabbed and going through various ordeals, I want to minimize being at the forefront. Virum, look, even today, I'm tirelessly inspecting the community's territory for the sake of the community, aren't I? And without any attendants or servants. Just look at how diligently I work. Oh, there's a migratory bird habitat nearby. I should stop by. Virum, this is all part of following an optimal route. It's definitely not tourism. Ooh, According to the original game story, the final battle between secret societies takes place here. I just took a small detour. Taking these short breaks to recharge is necessary to maintain work efficiency. Anyway, current location is around here. Russell. The positions of rivers and various terrain features can change at any time. I corrected the errors in my map while driving along the river, and screech. Soon I discovered it. Nothing grows there. An undeveloped phosphate rock mine. The reason I came to this area in the first place was to confirm its location. I compared the catalog map, my 21st century map, and the location I just confirmed to gauge the accuracy of each. A stream flowed right beside it, and with phosphate components dissolving and flowing down the stream, the riverbank was completely exposed soil. Nothing grows because there are too many nutrients. This is really absurd. It's a mine. Even in kanji, the word mine is written with characters meaning mineral and mountain. But this isn't a mountain, and phosphate rocks are just scattered on the ground. Just need to remove a little soil and that's it. North America really is a land blessed by God to create a superpower. Damn, why is the world so unfair? Some people live in countries where 70% of the territory is mountains, unable to even imagine forests or mines on flat land. Here, mines are just scattered across flatlands, and phosphate rock at that. Feeling a bit of psychological deprivation, I sighed and drove along the valley where the stream ran. If I continue, surely nearby. There. That's the carriage. There it is. I heard murmuring sounds, and soon people rushed towards me. I immediately turned off the engine, got out of the car, and checked the scene before my eyes. This is a new village near Pamlico Bay. A village where Scottish people who came after the Queen's exile and Spanish people who surrendered after the last battle live. Red-toned cabins made of wood and brick are scattered around the valley, and at the center, there's a building with a tall chimney. That's not a church but a whiskey distillery. These people built the distillery before a church. Since I don't tax them, they're really going for it. Although I subtly encouraged it, it's an impressive scale. Smoke continuously rising above it showed it was still operating. The village has only been established for 1 to 2 years, and yet it's already at that level. The villagers soon surrounded me and began taking me to the village. I was exhausted from responding to each of their welcoming greetings with a smile. Half pushed by the smiling and cheering people, when I reached the entrance of the village, I saw a warehouse. As its door opened and closed, I could see dozens of oak barrels stacked inside. Chapter 192. Open Pit Promise 1. The murmuring sounds in Scottish, Gaelic, English, and Spanish are growing like storm clouds just before rain. More and more spectators are gathering. I feel like a celebrity visiting a quiet rural village, causing quite a stir. This village. It was initially established about 3 years ago, and it really began to grow from last year. That means it was first established when Queen Elizabeth moved to Virginia and the Scottish people arrived. And it began to grow when the Spanish, who had been blocking the sea, were repelled by us. I've been a bit anxious since then. With tens of thousands of our population concentrated in a small area near Chesapeake Bay, I felt our surveillance capabilities and influence over the surrounding territories, both land and sea, gradually diminishing. The dense settlement pattern created blind spots in our intelligence network that we hadn't anticipated. Still, since this centralized population was easier to govern and control, and there were no competing nations or hostile powers in our immediate vicinity, I allowed myself to think somewhat complacently about our security situation. We focused on internal development rather than strengthening our perimeter defenses. Unfortunately, we eventually paid a severe price for that strategic complacency. The Spanish, recognizing our vulnerability, constructed a formidable fortress directly facing our territory, a clear provocation and threat to our sovereignty. It's worth noting that the Spanish settlers who built and occupied this installation weren't volunteers or colonists in the traditional sense, but rather prisoners who were relocated and settled in this region following Spain's defeat in the conflict of that period. So after that incident, we decided to grow a village near the Pamlico River. What particularly caught our strategic attention during this expansion was a growing village where Scottish immigrants had begun to gather in significant numbers. Seeing an opportunity for alliance and integration, we settled the newly joined Spanish people, those who had chosen to defect to our side, in this area among the Scots. Initially, there were considerable concerns. Scottish and Spanish people. People who speak Scottish, English, and Spanish. People who believe in Presbyterianism and Catholicism. Celtic and Latin peoples. People with different languages, religions, and cultures, perfect conditions for conflict, right? Still, since this place is close to Croton Island, the apostles and I took turns visiting to provide appropriate supervision. You there. Move those Chesapeake casks over here too.
Ah, understood.
Hey, Spanish friend. Let's carry them together. Arg. Damn it, Mierda. This is ridiculously heavy. I can't understand a word you're saying. What? I said it's heavy. Thanks to that, they seemed to get along reasonably well. Perhaps it was possible because I served as a central figure. Of course, there was one more important factor. Hello, everyone. Today we'll learn Spanish. You there in front? Would you say hello in Spanish?
Hola.
Correct. However, you shouldn't pronounce the H and just skip it. Next, the person standing behind. Please say, thank you, in Spanish. In one corner of the village, people were gathered, and among them stood individuals who looked like pastors or priests but somehow didn't give off a religious atmosphere. Please repeat what you just said in English. I don't like studying English. Well done. They either use Scottish while teaching Spanish to Scottish speakers or conversely, use Spanish while teaching English and Scottish. We're on the 7 times table. It won't be easy for you to solve this easily. Now, what is 7 times 6? 40?
No.
But everyone, just remember this. If you can read and write numbers and perform the 4 basic operations skillfully, you'll have no problems with life here. No, it will be very convenient. And in another corner of the settlement, they were teaching the use of Arabic numerals and mathematical symbols, patiently guiding people to solve simple multiplication and division problems on wooden tablets. The instructor, a bearded man with ink-stained fingers, moved methodically from student to student, correcting their work with quiet encouragement. It wasn't for children as one might expect. It was a dedicated class teaching adults of various ages and backgrounds. Many of them had calloused hands from years of labor, yet their eyes reflected intense concentration as they grappled with concepts entirely foreign to their upbringing. Yes, even knowledge of mathematical symbols is considered advanced learning in this era, a fact that's easy for us to forget. These numerical concepts that we take for granted represented revolutionary thinking for most of them. They were teaching mathematics alongside foreign languages and basic reading and writing skills, creating a comprehensive education program unusual for frontier settlements. Basically, in the Virginia community, dozens of languages echoed through the streets and households, a veritable babel of tongues. But the main ones in official use are English, Algonquin, and Spanish. Each language represented different power structures and cultural traditions that were slowly being woven together into our unique colonial tapestry. After teaching those languages just enough for settlers to make simple greetings and self-introductions, functional communication rather than fluency, they also taught mathematics at a level slightly higher than the average person of this era would ever encounter. The curriculum was carefully designed to expand practical skills without overwhelming students with abstract concepts they couldn't immediately apply. At first, Harriet and others tried to dissuade me, saying it was a waste of money, resources, and talent. But their attitudes changed after seeing the benefits in utilizing various personnel. This communication between people is quite convenient. Having them learn basic multiplication isn't bad at all, haha. It wasn't extraordinary education. It was all content that might be taught to lower elementary school students like the alphabet, greetings, self-introductions, and so on. But the results were significant nonetheless.
Hello, Pedro.
Hello. As people began to ask about each other's well-being with simple words, they learned to become familiar with one another. And as they calculated numbers with simple multiplication and division, people learned to think systematically in their daily lives. Anyway, when I looked at the teachers teaching people in the open space near the distillery, they bowed to me and so did the others. A nameless one. What brings you to this humble place? Please stay as you are. I'm just here for a brief visit, so don't worry too much. I don't want to disturb you. Chapter 193. Open Pit Promise. 2. I shouldn't have come to watch. My presence seemed to be disrupting the classes. I tried to discourage them as I went on my way, but the spectators still followed behind me. Their numbers seemed to be growing. Somehow, it feels like 80 to 90% of the village population is following me. Unable to shake them off, I continued with the crowd following me, and picked out the parliamentarian elected from this village to ask him, "Excuse me, Mr. Pastor? Which direction is the phosphate open pit mine that was being excavated last time?" The Spanish man looked relatively calm even when seeing me. He spoke to me with a somewhat apologetic expression. "Did you come all the way here looking for the phosphate mine?" "Yes, that's right." "Ah, I can guide you there. But before that. When I questioned him, the Spanish parliamentarian named Pastor scratched the back of his head awkwardly and said, "Could you baptize the newborns in the village?" "Baptism? Me?" Both fathers are Spanish, and they feel uncomfortable having their children baptized by a priest we elected among ourselves. That makes sense if they're Catholics. If it's someone they elected among themselves, it's just anyone without authority, but if I baptize them, it feels like a direct line to God, doesn't it? If I'm really an angel, it's not even heresy. After deliberating and nodding, the parliamentarian happily and excitedly brought people who looked like newlyweds. Between them were 2 children with tiny faces. With spectators still whispering here and there, I carefully applied water to the children's foreheads. People all around knelt and prayed. It had been a while since we appointed separate priests. It was a moment when I realized the religious authority given to me. Looking around, most people in this settlement were adults. However, many men and women were seen holding hands or standing close to each other, a result of primarily accepting couples or families during immigration. Soon, children will be born and grow among them, and their children will learn their respective languages, arithmetic, farming, and various other skills. We might need proper schools and teachers, not just the makeshift teaching we're doing now. If that's realized within 10 to 20 years. If we establish schools and train teachers not just here but in Croton, Roanoke, and Chesapeake Bay. Then couldn't we establish the world's first universal educational institution? Thank you for your effort, nameless one. Parliamentarian Pastor awakens me from these thoughts. As I lift my head, he smiles and guides me to the outskirts of the village. More than half of the villagers walked out following me. Perhaps because of this, the village scene behind me became very quiet as soon as I left. The parliamentarian, apparently happy about my visit, talked incessantly beside me. Actually, the phosphate mine has been quiet since the prisoners left, hasn't it? So I thought you had turned your attention away from this area. How could I lose interest in a place where whiskey comes from? Anyway, yes. Originally, we had gathered criminals who were planning intertribal terrorism and had them work here. Since we urgently needed labor force instead of imprisonment, we punished criminals by giving them specific tasks. It was like that back then too. More precisely, since the natives weren't familiar with detention, it was difficult to keep people confined for years. And I was uncomfortable with inflicting physical torture or punishment as was customary among both natives and Europeans in this era. So what remained was penal labor. We roughly selected a few tasks needed by the community, categorized them by difficulty and duration. Then we also categorized criminals based on the level of damage and severity of their crimes, and assigned them appropriate penal labor. That was the punishment method in our Virginia community. It might seem strange from a modern perspective, but in this era, this is the most civilized law. Regardless of East or West, various tortures and brutal executions were firmly established as law and custom in this era. It will be more than 100 years before gentler execution devices like the guillotine appear. Anyway, the Parliament assigned them the task of clearing the forests and soil around the phosphate open pit mine and developing the mine. After completing that task, They've been doing community service in Chesapeake Bay since last year. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, for a total of 300 hours. Once finished, they become normal citizens again. Anyway, we walked south for quite a while, looking around. Everyone except me was gasping for breath. The trees were becoming scarcer, and it seemed the soil would soon be exposed again. As we pushed on, soon a bright light pierced our eyes and the forest ended. And then, we saw it. The open-pit mine that prisoners had organized over several years. It wasn't in the form of an underground mine with a damp hole dug into the ground as we commonly imagine, but literally a dish-like depression where the layers covering the minerals had been removed. Phosphate rocks were scattered all over. However, we remained still, not approaching it. Because it's dangerous. Phosphate rock is a material that can easily catch fire. So just digging into it can be considered dangerous. In fact, before even discussing the danger, it's impossible to dig a phosphate mine in the form of tunnels as we generally imagine. If you do that, toxic gas accumulates. That's why we continued some mining and then stopped by my order. That's also why, as Parliamentarian Pastor asked, it seemed like we had forgotten about this place. As you instructed, we've prevented anyone from coming here carelessly. However, I understand that the resources from this place are very valuable. That's right, Parliamentarian Pastor. Then just leaving it abandoned seems wasteful. Don't worry, that's also true. I marked the location of the phosphate mine on the map and then opened my notebook again. What I had investigated and planned so far was written in it. It will be finished soon. We're finalizing preparations to utilize the phosphate from here. Chapter 194. The Birth of Fertile Mine 1. Andrew was a young man who lived in the Speyside region of Scotland. His family, like others, lived ordinarily by farming and brewing alcohol with their surplus grain. Until the day they had to hide equipment passed down from ancestors due to taxes imposed by royal decree. Eventually, they were scraping by selling already brewed alcohol or moonshine bit by bit, living quietly with their heads down when it happened. Announcement. To the land of true faith, freedom, and wealth. Virginia Trading Company Dash. Did you see it too? How much land they're giving away. Good heavens. They say they're distributing over 100 acres per household. They sowed dreams of becoming landowners in the new world. It was a time when stories of people making fortunes from aluminum or fur trading seemed to come from far away like dreams. He too thought he could become like that if he just crossed the Atlantic. He believed that after sweating a little, enduring some hardship while cultivating his own field in the wild land, he could become wealthy. His thinking was wrong. Vroom. Why farm by yourself? Leave it to us. Just come occasionally to sow seeds and pull weeds. He received already reclaimed farmland as a gift. The farming is done by the knights on his behalf. They don't take taxes for anything. Uniquely here, taxes were called gifts. Without any hardship, he became wealthy. And he and his neighbors were clever. Do we really need to plant seeds? The Knight Brigade will do it for us even if we don't. Even so, the taxes, no, gifts that we give less aren't that significant. Farmers who survived under Scotland's constantly changing tax system quickly figured out how they should live in this new paradise. Do we really need to farm? Wouldn't it be better to just take surplus barley and brew alcohol to sell to the mainland like our ancestors did? And there's no tax if we brew here? It's not even moonshine. So they didn't obsess over the dream of becoming landowners. The path to wealth in this land was not in becoming landowners as they had known. The villagers pooled their resources to build a massive distillery, and Andrew worked there too. He was working there today as well. There. It's him. It's him. With that single phrase, he abandoned the cask he was rolling and came all the way here. Equals. The new village of Scottish people in the Pamlico region. That is, the village that settlers call Glenna Injal, Angel's Valley. Well, it's better than naming a village Sijui, because they planted many Sijui grapes, or calling it barren, because they planted many barren potatoes. Anyway, a phosphate rock mine is about to be developed near this village. Phosphate rock literally means minerals containing phosphate. Since it's rich in phosphorus, an essential component of living organisms, it's used in fertilizer production. In this era without chemical fertilizers, digging the ground yields fertilizer, mining agricultural productivity from a mine, is an unbelievable blessing. Even though it's not as rich in nitrogen as the guano piled high in Peru, South America, it's still more than enough to be grateful for. But in America, this stuff is just scattered all over the ground. Thinking about it again, the world is really unfair. Looking at the map, it's not even just in this area. Let's stop complaining about the 21st century that we can't return to. The important thing is that I'm in this land now and need to focus on the current situation. The phosphate in this area is mostly in sand form and mixed with fine quartz and clay. Therefore, although there may not be an immediate risk of natural fire, it should be approached carefully. First, let's go back to the car for a moment. I have something to bring. I would appreciate it if a few strong men could help me. What?
Understood.
The parliamentarians selected some stronger individuals from among the spectators, and we drove the porter near the phosphate mine and looked around. I want to draw water from the lowlands and connect it to this area. To this area? Yes. The goal is to bring water here and create a decent-sized lake. Well, more like an artificial pond. After researching fertilizer-related materials at home and searching through the catalog contents, the conclusion was clear. Phosphate, due to its chemical properties, dissolves easily in water. If we're going to filter out other impurities anyway, a dissolving process in water will be necessary. According to my research, dissolving in water is an essential process for making phosphoric acid from phosphate rock, so a pond is necessary. Above all, considering the fire risk, there should be water nearby. What is the most important resource in our settlement? Aluminum? Grape seeds? The endless supply of various fertilizers and daily necessities from my house? None of these. Our most important resource is people. Preventing people from dying or getting injured is not only a moral act but also the most practical approach. In developing this phosphate mine, we must ensure that no one gets hurt. If people frequently die or get injured, it would be better not to develop it until we find another method. But how should we maintain the artificial pond? For humans or animals to draw water? We can use this. I brought the pump I had loaded on top of the camper and placed it in front of them. If we use this to draw water, we can create a pond up here. However, for that, we need someone to regularly place coal here and manage this pump. I'll find people for that. Thank you, Parliamentarian Pastor. Please convey that the community will pay adequate compensation for this as well. Of course, in this blessed land, who wouldn't be rewarded? Listening to the parliamentarian's words, I looked around. There are still many spectators gathered in this area. It seems like about 500 people, and I remember the village population was just over 600. So basically all the Scottish and Spanish people living here have gathered. At this point, I raised my hand and said, from now on, I plan to select people from Glenaingel, Angels Valley, to be the managers of the mine to be established here. Then people begin to murmur with a different atmosphere than before. We need miners to extract valuable resources from there, and technicians to process those resources under extremely strict and delicate conditions. Chapter 195. The Birth of Fertile Mine 2. These days, I feel our community members are becoming increasingly relaxed. It's not just about becoming wealthy. I mean, they have more free time. In a way, this is natural. In this era, 80 to 90% of the population are farmers, and the most important concern is how to secure food. But we suddenly introduced 21st century crops with tractors and achieved agricultural mechanization. Inevitably, people have less to do. Originally, they cultivated gardens on their allocated lands. But nowadays, even farming is efficiently handled by the stronghold. Just look at that distillery in Glenaingel and you can estimate. With not much to do, surplus barley, and no taxes, as soon as I gave a little nudge, they excitedly built an enormous distillery. Everyone was bored, weren't they? People can't live without doing anything. But I mentioned compensation. So maybe 50 to 100 people would volunteer. Of course, this is far from enough manpower to fully mine this site. But we could fill the shortage from Chesapeake. Can my family volunteer? Of course. See? Everyone was indeed bored. Volunteers are appearing so quickly. We volunteer too. Would it be okay to live here entirely? I can do well too. Just leave it to me. Pardon. Suddenly, Scottish people begin to volunteer like a swarm of bees. About 300 to 400 people. What? Why so many? Equals. I was just killing time at the local brewery anyway. Should I just go there? It seemed no worse than making a living selling alcohol from the brewery. No, it seemed even better since the Nameless One himself promised compensation. That means it's an important task in this community and there will be good profit. Andrew glanced at his wife beside him, and they simultaneously raised their hands. I'll take you too. Do you work at the brewery? Hearing his voice, Andrew became greatly excited. Yes, I work there. I'm familiar with handling complex machinery or whatever is needed. Interest flickered across his face. He nodded. Like Andrew, many people abandoned the dream of becoming landowners to find different paths, especially among the Scottish. Most of them were familiar with factory work, handling distillers and managing malt at the brewery. Most of them rushed to Kin Issei seeking opportunities. Eventually, Kin Issei, unable to resist the wave of requests, appointed over 300 Scottish people as mine workers and managers. It wasn't a bad recruitment rate. No, it exceeded the target. The enthusiastic volunteers soon finished preparations to move their belongings and cabins. Within days, tents appeared below the mine, and soon another village split from Glenaingel formed. They elected a parliamentarian among themselves, then approached Kin Issei, asking him to name the village. Then the Nameless One spoke. Then, let's call it Fertile Mine, Main Torek. Clang, clang, bump, screech. Sounds of tightening, oiling, and hammering alternate, then soon fade. As technicians move back and forth signaling, the chief technician nods to the knight. The knight climbs onto the well-maintained tractor and grips the controls. As the gate opens, the tractor slowly pulls its heavy body outside. The tractor makes various loud noises, the sounds of metal against metal, gears engaging, steam escaping, scare away nearby birds. And soon, an accompaniment that shakes the ground adds to this chorus of fire and steel as something approaches the tractor. Sir Powell, are you going out now? How do you plan to alternate with Sir Hind? It's squires riding horses, waving the Knight Brigade's flags. When Chief Squire I.M. Buckner, who is close to obtaining a knight's license, calls out, Powell nods and says, Yes, Sir Hind asked me to cover his duties just for today. Today I'm in charge of land reclamation and sowing. I am Francis. Go ahead and clear the planned reclamation site. As soon as the knight's order falls, I am and Francis immediately charge forward on their horses. All are wearing simple protective gear and holding weapons. It might seem excessive. After all, knights are just farmers. One might think there's no reason to equip weapons and mount horses when they're not going to war like knights. Growl, to the left. If you drive that wolf pack to the left, I'll lure them toward the pit. Good. Francis. Here. Take the musket. Bang. Ratat. But alligators swarm in America's wetlands, and wolves and buffalo roam fiercely in forests and fields. Just as medieval lords and knights protected their people by hunting not only humans but also beasts. They expanded fields by chasing wolves and various animals in the American wilderness. Bang! Plus, the fur obtained in the process also returned as a nice side income. But of course, driving out beasts was also the most dangerous job, so the most skilled and experienced squires took charge of it. While the two squires who drove out all the animals from the planned reclamation site wait, the tractor escorted by other squires soon arrives along the road. Fuel-in-charge Squire Eric carried water containers and coal, and equipment-in-charge Squire Edward transported various implements by cart. Thud! Clatter! Clatter! Meanwhile, IM leads other squires in planting flags around the planned reclamation site and connecting them with ropes. They measure the distance and area between them, designating which land will fall under whose ownership. After driving away animal herds, parceling the land, and preparing the tractor, Knight Sir Powell finally grips the controls and begins to move. Bump! Bump! Behind the tractor, sharp disc plows cut weed roots and crush soil particles, gradually softening the rough land. Steam tractors, by their nature, are not easy to control in terms of speed and direction. Accordingly, Sir Powell moved along the optimal route he had planned in his head, plowing the field. In between, fuel-in-charge Squire Eric filled the boiler room with water, and as soon as the plowing was finished, equipment-in-charge Squire Edward, who had been inspecting the seeder, attached it to the back of the tractor and moved again. In this way, with just one knight and 5 or 6 squires moving briefly, about 5 hectares of land was seeded. That alone was an area about 3 or 4 times the size of the farm site that was transported with Kin Issei. In this manner, during February 1605, for 1 month, they cultivated hundreds of hectares, an area hundreds of times larger than Kin Issei's farm. All the work of leveling the soil, sowing seeds, plowing weeds, applying fertilizer and water was handled by just the personnel at the stronghold, including 2 knights. The personnel at Stronghold 17 numbered about 20, including knights, technicians, and squires. Just 20 people. Chapter 196. Dawn of Commerce, 1. Early 1605. About 18 years since Kin Issei was transported with his farm. The dawn of the 17th century. It was a time when seeds of major upheavals were being planted and sprouting: the Little Ice Age, the Scientific Revolution, the Ming-Qing transition, the establishment of absolute monarchy, and more. While the whole world was waiting for the imminent great changes. Is the wheat harvest good this year? Well, it's bountiful as always. It's a pity we have nowhere to export it except the British Isles. The Virginia community was quiet. No, quiet was insufficient to describe it. Hey, don't you ever visit your fields? Why bother? Doesn't the Night Brigade manage them? The Virginia community was peaceful. When tractors first appeared, people rejoiced that they could acquire more land. When tractors began harvesting for them, people rejoiced that farming had become much easier. Now that the agricultural equipment knights plowed the fields, sowed seeds, pulled weeds, and harvested the crops, everyone was speechless. It wasn't a change that happened all at once. As the number of tractors gradually increased and the variety of implements attached to them diversified, it just naturally became this way. Before they knew it, they rarely went to their fields anymore. They would just occasionally stroll around to check if their farming was going well, and during harvest season, head to the Night Brigade stronghold to collect their share of wheat. Is it really okay to do nothing? Do I need to repay this debt later or? That wheat came from your land, so what is there to repay? Your gift to the community and knights has already been set aside. Really, they didn't have to do anything? Turan, a Welsh farmer and carpenter, was also shocked by this fact. He had just arrived here and received land. He was too busy to pay attention to that land, but wheat, barley, and beans grew there on their own. Since he couldn't eat all those grains, Turan set aside only what his family needed and entrusted the rest to the community to sell in England. Then, a few months later, all that grain returned as various household items and spices he had ordered. He truly did nothing. In her spare time, Turan's wife, like noble ladies, obtained flower seeds from Scotland and cultivated a garden in front of their house. In his spare time, he took his children fishing or hunting. Not so much to catch something to eat, but to kill time. He wondered why so many people were enthusiastic about church gatherings, why they participated so eagerly in cathedral construction without even getting paid. It was because everyone had too much time on their hands. Those who wanted a more luxurious life, those with skills, contributed to the community by building ships or making aluminum rings, and in return, received more and better luxury items. But Turan was an ordinary farmer and carpenter. He wasn't someone with exceptional abilities to create things for export to the British Isles or France. His house was a bit too far to work at the vineyard. Oh, Dad, I caught a salmon. A salmon. That's not a salmon. Never mind. Bring it here. So he just killed time. Scratch, scratch. Sometimes, as he did back home, he carved wood in his spare time, recalling the past when making a living was difficult. Even though it was just a few years ago, it now felt very distant. Hey, Welsh friend. What are you doing? Just carving wood. I have nothing to do. Can I take a look at what you're carving? It looks quite good. A candlestick. Oh, I've been needing a candlestick for my house. Can you give me one? I was carving this as a hobby. As you can see, it has a lot of decorations. And this wood is imported. As Turan hesitated, his neighbor looked around. There were about a dozen similar candlesticks lined up. If you don't want to just give it away, can I buy all of those? I happen to have an embroidered tablecloth from France that I could trade, or... Saying this, Turan's English neighbor pulled out an Othello chip from his pocket. Would this be acceptable payment? Aha! Isn't that one chip worth 100 livres? He's just handing it to me? If you won't take this either.
No.
Take them all. I'll also send you this one once it's finished. Really? Then I'll also need a box to put these candlesticks in. I'll provide that too. Just take them for now. I'll give you everything later. Just leave the chip. Really? All right. It was a good deal. The next day, Turan took the chip across the bay and bought various woods and household items from French merchants. Then he began selling not only candlesticks but also statues of the Virgin Mary that Spanish people loved, and statues of him. Oh, is that a wooden statue of Nemo? Could I have one? This is a colored piece. It stands knee-high, so it would probably cost about half a chip. Then put it on my tab for now. I'll come back later with a whole chip and buy some Virgin Mary statues too. That wasn't all. Virginia residents mostly made their own items that were awkward to import from overseas. But when Turan started making and selling small chairs and cabinets, everyone eagerly bought them. His business expanded day by day, and Othello chips piled up by the dozens in his house. He set up a stand in front of his house and built a new workshop next to it. Still, there wasn't enough space. Eventually, he approached the parliamentarian in charge of the area and asked, "Excuse me, I'd like to open a separate shop. How should I go about it?" Haven't you already opened a shop at your house? I'd like to expand. I want to open a shop near the harbor where many people pass by, not just in our village. That's community land. Let me ask around. Chapter 197. Dawn of Commerce. 2. So the Welsh parliamentarian immediately approached Manteo and asked, "Apostle, one of our people wants to open a shop in the empty space near the harbor. Would that be acceptable? Isn't that land owned by the community? I'm not sure if I should decide this on my own. It's not within your authority? Then. Wait a moment. We haven't had such cases before, have we?" Manteo walked over to someone who happened to be staying at Chesapeake Bay and asked, "Nemo, I have something to ask you." What is it? Equals. So that's the situation, and he wants to build a shop. But since it's community land, we're not sure what to do, so I'm asking for your input. He wants to build a shop where there's high foot traffic. It's a reasonable request. There's nothing wrong with that. I suppose he could just give a bit more of his field's grain to the community as a gift, right? So he just needs to pay for it. Well, as long as he's not obstructing people's passage by setting up in the middle of the road. But word has spread, and not just this carpenter but others also want to open shops in that area one by one. Should we leave that to them as well? Well, if that's the case, let them handle it themselves. Nemo? Wait a moment, please. A briefly ominous feeling, passed through me. What is this? It's a sensation I haven't felt in a very long time. It's been so long that I almost can't remember if I ever had such a feeling. Then if I announce that people are allowed to build shops as they see fit. No, that won't work. I remember now. This is that feeling. That chilling sensation I felt before I moved to the countryside. That sensation I acquired while living in a commercial residential building in Tokyo, a city of unplanned development and traffic congestion. Roads are jammed like the world's largest parking lots. Yet actual parking spaces are nowhere to be found. Cars without destinations circle around like zombies before illegally parking on the street. The nearby residential area is poorly organized. The already narrow road feels even narrower due to illegally parked cars. Some bastard parked his car right in front of the stairs leading to my studio apartment. We can't just let them do as they please. I just prevented a terrible future hundreds of years from now. No, even without traffic congestion from vehicles, if shops pop up haphazardly in crowded areas, it will naturally become chaotic. Plus, if shops appear, more people will crowd in to visit them, and the congestion will increase proportionally. Even thinking just a few years ahead, it makes sense to organize things now. I solemnly declared to Mantio, well then, let's build a commercial complex first. There will be no unplanned development in my settlement. Anyway, screens and temporary walls were set up around the port facilities in Chesapeake. And as people worked busily, 2 appropriate large buildings emerged within a few months. I added Lexan panels in an arcade format above the walkway between them, allowing sunlight to pass through while providing shelter from rain and snow. Behind these buildings, I created a road for carriages to transport various goods.
Tajda.
A neat, orderly shopping district emerged. For reference, I borrowed the structure from 21st century Japanese traditional markets. I designed it to accommodate 10 shops in Building 1 on the left and 10 shops in Building 1 on the right, and they filled up instantly. After all the shops were occupied, I formed a management group to handle the maintenance and repairs of the buildings independently, so there was nothing left for us to do. The major construction project was adequately completed in about 5 months. While going to see the bustling shopping district with Eleanor, I suddenly became curious and asked, but we haven't issued any currency, have we? What do they use for transactions? Don't we already have currency? There are 100 livre chips that we exchanged when trading with the French.
100 livres?
100 livres would require several kilograms of silver coins. Wouldn't it? Even in gold coins, it would be more than just 1 or 2. How do they use such high-value currency in daily life? Upon hearing Eleanor's words, I observed a nearby flower shop. The shop owner handed something to a customer, scribbled something in a notebook, nodded, and said, "You bought 0.002 Othello worth. Do you remember how much you have left?" "Huh? I bought dishes worth 0.04 Othello at that pottery shop, so now I only have 0.01 Othello left. I should go to the exchange soon." The customer and flower shop owner had this strange conversation before parting ways. Looking at another shop, I saw customers and shop owners deeply engaged in calculations, writing things down while conversing. What is this exchange? It's difficult to explain simply, "Oh, there's an exchange at the end of the street. Would you like to go see?" This time, I looked at the exchange building Eleanor pointed to. People were lined up in front of a temporary building about the size of a couple of containers. They were murmuring loudly among themselves. With people crowding all around, I didn't feel like going there right away. "It's fine, Eleanor. Let's look around elsewhere first." Saying that, I quietly entered a carpenter's shop. The carpenter, not noticing me, was engrossed in something. 7 statues at 0.132 Othello each, so the total, plus 9 at 0.167 each, and at 0.053 each. Done. The shop owner, seemingly finished with calculations, whistled to call his son who was dozing in the corner. When the son came running, he handed him a paper and pointed toward the exchange we had just seen. "Go to the exchange and say this is the amount Sir James Powell ordered."
Ah, okay.
"I just need to mention this number. Right, father? Don't forget to tell the receptionist our shop name too." "Oh, I didn't expect this. I think I have a slight idea of what that exchange building does." Chapter 198. Exchange 1. Eleanor. Yes, Who operates that exchange building? Well, since the management committee maintains the shopping district, wouldn't the exchange be operated by the management committee too? As I looked around, a bell rang in the distance, its clear tone echoing through the cobblestone streets. Checking my phone, it was already 7 p.m. It was closing time for the shopping district. As the sun hung low on the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the facades, stores gradually began to close their doors. Shop owners pulled down metal shutters with practiced movements, while spectators and customers started flowing out of the streets like an ebbing tide, their shopping bags swinging at their sides. Just as in the carpenter's shop earlier, store clerks and owners everywhere were gathering their belongings and moving with purpose, clutching papers filled with meticulous notes and figures from the day's transactions. Their footsteps formed a synchronized rhythm as they headed in the same direction, straight to that exchange at the end of the street. It was a building that had appeared while I was away, as I hadn't needed to visit the shopping district for several months. Curiosity piqued, I walked toward the exchange, following the steady movement of people, careful to maintain a respectful distance so as not to intrude. And from a slight distance, I observed how this so-called exchange operated, fascinated by the orderly procession of merchants at day's end. The exchange was a modest brick building, weathered yet dignified. It stood on the opposite side from where I entered, marking one of two main entrances to the shopping district. With its red roof tiles catching the last rays of daylight, it looked quite picturesque in the setting sun, like something from an old painting. A central hub of commerce bathed in amber light as shadows lengthened across the square. Here, Sir James Powell spent 0.611 Othello at Johnson's woodshop, so deduct that amount. Understood. Again, Sir James Powell spent 0.027 Othello at Mrs. McAvoy's flower shop, so deduct that amount. No, from now on, all the expenditures I'm about to mention belong to Sir James Powell. Understood. 0.240 at the pottery shop on the left, 0.002 at the accessory shop on the left, and 0.112 at the clothing shop. As the man recited data collected from various places, pens and papers moved ceaselessly, performing calculations. Sir James Powell's total expenditure is 1.872 Othello. How much did Sir James Powell deposit at the exchange? 3 Othello. Record it. James Powell's balance. 1.128 Othello. Scratch, scratch. As expected. The 1 Othello they're talking about corresponds to 100 livres, and 1 livre equals 20 sous. In Les Miserables, which I watched when I was young, Jean Valjean earned 24 sous after working hard all day. That means Jean Valjean would have to save money without even breathing for just under 3 months to earn 1 Othello. And that's the price in the 19th century, 200 years later. Thinking about it again, 1 Othello is an absurdly high denomination. Of course it is, since it was created for large-scale foreign trade. But now this currency is being used within our community. It's the only existing currency after all. For example, what if there was only one 1 million yen bill, no, a 10 million yen bill? It might be an absurd situation, but let's think about it. How would people conduct transactions? They would probably deposit that 10 million yen bill in a bank, record their purchases each time, and settle everything at once later. That is similar to the principle of early credit cards. So is that exchange a bank? Fascinated, I stared intently at the exchange building until I realized people were noticing me. So I moved away to avoid disrupting their work. An early form of credit card in the early 17th century. That's really interesting. Let's postpone issuing smaller denominations for now. What? Is that okay? When Eleanor cautiously asked me, I nodded. Actually, the Othello chip seems to be a fine currency. First of all, it's absolutely impossible to counterfeit with current technology. Although I'm no expert in economics, counterfeiting currency is bad, right? If we were to create a currency of lower value than Othello, we would need to devise a unit that's 100 to 1,000 times lower in value. And that currency would probably be the main one used in daily life. The problem is that there are hardly any consumables in my house that can meet the daily demand in sufficient quantities. Even if there were, they could be replicated, so there's no merit. For now, it's probably best to leave it as is until we come up with an alternative. Perhaps? Why didn't I have something like Mankiew's economics at home? I'm a layman when it comes to economics. Thinking this, I shook my head, and soon Eleanor hurried to the flower shop, which was about to close. Eleanor? What are you doing? Ah, my father hasn't been going outside lately. I thought I'd bring him some flowers. That's a good idea. White is now 66 years old. Is he not doing well? Not yet, but... Anyway, I saw Eleanor make a slightly sorrowful expression. Equals. The response was enthusiastic when the first commercial complex was built. People from the community all took out the Othello chips they had been saving and flocked to the newly built complex. Opochancanoughs, who had always considered himself a capable fox hunter, was among them. He roamed the valleys around Chesapeake, which had become nearly uninhabited as everyone moved away, hunting wild animals. As human presence diminished, foxes and weasels returned, only to fall one by one to his traps and arrows. He carefully skinned them to minimize damage and collected the hides. That wasn't all. He had succeeded, albeit on a small scale, in breeding foxes with his tribesmen, which allowed him to secure fox skins and meat much more stably than simply going hunting. All these furs were sold to the French. The French were crazy about such furs and didn't hesitate to hand over Othello chips to him. With the Othello chips he collected, he purchased better hunting tools, ventured deeper into the forests, and made even greater profits. Chapter 199. Exchange 2. For him, collecting these Othello items was fun in itself. He loved their mysterious sticky nature and their strange outer shell, lighter than stone yet sturdy. Opochancanoughs neatly stored his collected Othellos at home. Until, look, everyone, this cabinet costs only 0.2 Othello. 0.2 Othello? You mean I could get 5 of those with 1 chip? Of course, Councilman Opochancanoughs. Why don't you buy 1? Give me 1 for now. We'll deliver it to your home. First, let's get your fingerprint here. After browsing the shopping district once, he entrusted all the Othello he had to the exchange, as if in a trance. The exchange receptionist was surprised to see a wealthy person depositing more than 10 Othello at once. Feeling even more proud, he straightened his shoulders and entered the shopping district. Here, this is worth 0.200 Othello. 0.2 Othello. Add 0.3 to 0.67. What's wrong? Is your balance insufficient? Somehow offended by those words, Opochancanoughs frowned and spoke. With all the Othello he had collected so far, how could he possibly have spent it all here? No, it doesn't seem insufficient. Not at all insufficient. Take it as is. And then, the calculations don't match. What? Check again. Let's see where it went wrong. Here it is. The amount paid by someone named Opochancanoughs and the amount spent don't match. Naturally, from the perspective of the exchange receptionists who were happily settling accounts at the end of the day, it was alarming to suddenly find money missing. It wasn't a calculation error either. They had been stuck on this for 3 hours already, and the result was the same every time they calculated. The shop owners and clerks belonging to the Chesapeake Harbor Shopping Complex Management Committee immediately convened a meeting, then visited Opochancanoughs' house. It's short? That can't be right. If you add 0.2 to 0.3, it is short. You spent a total of 17.15 Othello. With 0.15 Othello remaining, you just need 1 more Othello chip. Wait a moment. Opochancanoughs quickly checked his warehouse. Unfortunately, there were no furs left, and no Othello chips were rolling around in any corner. In the end, Opochancanoughs could only sigh and say to the receptionist who had come looking for him, "Why, you and I both understand the situation, don't we? I won't fail to repay it." Wait, I'll pay it back soon. I'll contact you when the problem is resolved. After sending the receptionist back and sitting in his chair, pondering what to do. Knock, knock. Mr. Opachankino, please open the door. Someone else came looking for him. When he opened the door, it was a different man. Before Opachankino could ask anything, the man spoke. I've come to ask what you want to do with your harvested crops. You'll sell them to England, right? Please tell me what goods you want to import with that money. Ah, that's it. A brilliant idea occurred to Opachankino. He grabbed the manager's hand and spoke. When the man tried to pull away in confusion, Opachankino gripped his hand even more firmly and pulled him closer. Why are you doing this? Is there something urgent? Is it possible for me to receive payment for my crops in something other than goods? What? What do you mean? You know that? Othello chips. It will be quite insufficient, though. Then I'll catch furs and gift them to the community. Wouldn't that be enough? Please. If you insist, I'll ask higher up. It might be possible. Slam. The door closed again. And 2 months later, Opachankino proudly went to the exchange and settled his debt. Please don't make this mistake again. Of course not. Since you were late, we'll charge a bit more. Would an additional 0.01 Othello be acceptable? Well, that much is fine. They passed it off as if it were nothing significant. Others occasionally found themselves in debt to the exchange due to calculation errors or forgetfulness. In such cases, the exchange would accept only a small late fee and clear their debts. This was possible because everyone knew that they all had means to pay back. No one found themselves in a particularly serious situation. No one particularly regarded this situation as extraordinary. It was just another day in the community passing by. And during one of those ordinary days, Mom? What's happening? Oh. One day, Eleanor Dare knocked on the door of her only daughter, Virginia Dare. As soon as Virginia opened the door, she understood the situation from her mother's expression. She quickly changed from her nightwear to outdoor clothes and washed her hands thoroughly. The two walked out in modest, inconspicuous attire. Neighbors in Croton Island started to greet them but fell silent upon noticing the somber atmosphere. Eventually, the two reached a cabin. It didn't take long since the residential area on Croton Island wasn't very large. This island had more area occupied by grapes than people. The cabin, like other houses on Croton Island, had neatly whitewashed walls with a light and soft green roof. It looked small but cozy. Creak. No knocking was necessary to enter this cabin. Upon opening the door and entering, watercolors reflecting the homeowner's taste were placed throughout. Most were meticulous sketches of scenery from Croton Island and Chesapeake. The owner of this house was a painter. Creak, creak. Hearing the sound of a rocking chair in the distance, Eleanor and her daughter cautiously approached. There sat an old man, gasping for breath with difficulty. Dad! John White appeared to be struggling to hold himself upright. He barely moved his pupils to look at his daughter and granddaughter, and lifted the corners of his mouth as a greeting. Ah! Uff! Don't strain yourself, just rest. We're just here to help with household chores today. With that, John White fell back into a deep sleep, like a corpse. While Eleanor dusted the house, Virginia held her grandfather's hand, focusing on whether his pulse changed. Thump, thump. A very weak and thin rhythm could be felt from his wrist. It seemed like a rhythm that could stop at any moment. As Virginia grew up, Eleanor aged, and John grew old. He remained among them like an eternal boy, young and childlike. An apostle of Nemo was dying. Chapter 200. Inheritance. 1. Dark clouds gather but no rain falls. The humid and dark air settles over a hill in Virginia. People dressed in black come and go, then stop. Soon, particularly young and sturdy individuals among them step forward and dig into the earth with shovels. After digging to about shoulder height, they climb back up. And into that hole they lower a coffin. The priest-cum-pastor sprinkles soil and flowers over it. John Courtney, we entrust your soul to God and lay your body to rest in the earth. Lord, may you resurrect John Courtney on the final day and grant him eternal life. Amen. 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 Thus proceeds the funeral of an Englishman who settled in Virginia at the age of 30. His wife had already died giving birth to their second son back in England, so there was no one to be buried beside him. Mourners, including his 2 sons whom he brought to this land, commemorated his untimely death. Good heavens! Not even 50 years old yet. At least his children are nearly 20, which is fortunate. What was the cause of death? I don't know. His children came home and found his heart had stopped. Those gathered in black mourning clothes whispered to each other. The pastor-priest of this village, named Clearwater, after the grape variety grown there, recites a Bible verse. People bow their heads and listen to his words. Romans says thus, "Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. This means that through Adam all people were destined to die. But the Lord sent his only begotten Son for these wounded and fallen people, so that as sin and death entered through one man, so through one man. But even amid this, some continue to whisper. Wasn't it said that when coming to Virginia, one would receive 50 hectares? As far as I know, Mr. Courtney had only received about 18 hectares. SHHHH. But that land. Ahem. Of course, the conversation couldn't continue for long. Soon after the prayers and funeral for the deceased concluded, people dispersed and resumed their earlier conversations. Speaking of which, what happens to those 18 hectares? Will the government give up to 50 hectares again? They should. Then how will the land be divided? Should the firstborn take more? Why go that far? It should be divided equally. Anyway, the sons will become a bit impoverished. Why do you say that? Well, even if divided equally, that's only 9 hectares each, and the crops from that. People continued discussing what happens after death. The topic showed no signs of cooling down. No, it was beyond that level. Then isn't it disadvantageous to have many children? The more children, the more finely the land gets divided. Come on. If someone is dissatisfied, can't they just reclaim land themselves and claim it as their own? Can they reclaim faster than the Night Brigade? And would the Night Brigade even manage such reclaimed land? The untimely death of a man named John Courtney quickly spread throughout the Virginia community, becoming a topic of discussion. He wasn't particularly important. Just because his tombstone read, "Good son, good husband, good father," didn't mean he had made significant contributions to the community. However, he came to this land early and died early. That alone was enough to make him a topic of conversation. Europeans had been settling in Virginia for less than 20 years. Similarly, most Europeans who settled in Virginia were either young single men or young couples without children yet. In other words, they weren't at an age to think about death. But time had passed. They gradually began thinking about what comes after death. Naturally, one question followed. What will happen to my children's land? Well, originally, our community agreed to distribute 50 hectares of land per immigrant household. As Hewitt spoke cautiously, everyone nodded. 50 hectares, about 120 acres, about 500,000 square meters. It's about 38 times the size of my farm. It's enough land for anyone to live beyond mere subsistence, to live abundantly, lavishly. Moreover, unlike in original history, they aren't just given land and told to reclaim it themselves. They are given already reclaimed land. Naturally, distributing land that can be used immediately is much more difficult than simply drawing a few lines on a map and saying, "This is now your land." That's why the pace of land distribution has been so slow until now. But now more than 10 years have passed. To be precise, 17 years have passed since I arrived. Ample time for a person's lifespan to come to an end. The natives didn't care much about land. They had a loose concept of tribal territory, but the idea of ownership of the land itself remained foreign to them. When someone among them passed away, the land naturally dissolved and returned to the community. But it's different for Europeans with a clear concept of ownership and Africans who had been under European rule. For them, the concern of how to inherit this land was gradually emerging as an issue. No one has yet received the full 50 hectares. As mentioned earlier, 50 hectares is an area where anyone can live lavishly, and it's more than enough to be a landowner even in England. Can't we just reclaim the land of the deceased? Haven't most natives already gifted their land as they saw fit? Again, Manteo cautiously spoke up. Walter Raleigh shook his head in response. That's absurd. You still don't understand our people's desire for possession. Unlike natives who are taken care of by their tribes, how are people from the old continent supposed to live if their land is reclaimed? Well, we could just distribute new land, couldn't we? Until now, mostly couples came and received 50 hectares each, right? Now we could divide it and give 25 hectares to each person. Let's do it that way from now on. And when that person dies, we reclaim it. Everyone, accustomed to land ownership, was about to object to Manteo's suggestion. It seemed absurd, but that makes sense.